Okay, after many months of putting this thing together, we were able to, thankfully, um, be able to invite the Vietnam veterans you see in front of you. We're going to tell you a little bit about their experience and answer some questions. And we should probably have maybe a little time for some audience questions also, but we have kind of pre-made some questions here for you. This is Mr. Huber. Okay, Mr. Huber. John.
Okay. All right. We are all members of the Lancaster chapter of Vietnam Veterans of America. This is a wonderful organization. It's not like a VFW or American Legion, a social place. We meet, we look after the needs of our fellow veterans, help them through tough times. And one of the big things we do is these school panel presentations. Now, we're based out of Lancaster, and we do almost every high school in Lancaster and a couple of middle schools. We are branching out. This is the first time we've been here. I said we've been doing this for 11 years. And the way this works, we are not here to teach a history lesson. We're not here to make political statements. We're here for one reason, and that what do you want to know about the Vietnam War and the Vietnam War era? We want to answer your questions, because almost every one of the questions is going to lead into our own personal experiences. So we're going to have some very brief introductions. We'll make a few opening remarks, and then we're going to go into the questions. And hopefully maybe 15, 20 minutes before the end of the session, we're going to break off and we have a display set up in the other in the gymnasium, and you guys can, as many as you can, take a look at it and maybe talk a little more one-on-one with us. So we'll go down this way. Ed, you want to start?
I guess I will. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ed Bookman. I was drafted December 1965 in the United States Army. I was 19 years old when I was drafted. I spent 9 months in training, went to Vietnam in September 1966, and it was an infantry outfit. My entire tour in Vietnam was spent out in the field. Search and destroy missions, ambush patrols, listening posts, security for artillery outfits. Upon coming home from Vietnam, in September 1967, I was discharged from the service. I joined this organization in 2014, and this is my 10th year doing school sessions. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dan DeWin. I was drafted the 1st of October 1966 in the United States Army. After basic training, I was sent to aircraft engine school. Fantastic. Big aircraft, big engines, big planes, wrong. Week 4 we started with gas turbines. They went UE helicopters, left for Vietnam the 1st of November 1967, came back the 17th of October 1968 in one piece. Thanks for having us here.
Good morning. My name is Lou Farganis. I enlisted in the Marine Corps back in 1962 before anybody ever heard of Vietnam. So I was fortunate enough to have 2.5 years of really good training, jungle training, and you name it. I had special warfare, all kinds of stuff. So anyway, I went to Vietnam when the buildup started in 1965, the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. I was an infantry squad leader, and I spent my whole tour duty out in the field eating sea rations. I mean, I had a real meal. In December of '65, I was wounded twice by gunfire. I caught one round through my helmet, and I carried a bullet in my head. I spent 6 weeks at Yokosuka Naval Hospital, and then I went back to my unit at Chu Lai, and I came home in June of 1966. Thanks for having us in your school.
Hello, my name is Mike Kaninsky, and I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I enlisted in the Navy in 1967. In 1969, I was on a spy ship that the Navy had decided to scrap. I was a second-class engineman, which is known as a diesel mechanic. They gave us a dream sheet of where you wanted to go, and I put in for Vietnam for PBR, which were the little riverboats that went up the rivers. But I did not receive orders to that. I received orders for the USS Harnett County, which was part of Task Force 116, which was Brownwater Navy. She was only a quarter-mile offshore, but that ship could go up rivers. At that point, we were a mothership for PBRs and also UB gunships known as Navy Seawolves. We stayed on station. We didn't tie up at night. The ship was turned over to the South Vietnamese Navy in October 12th of 1970. I was separated from the Navy in 1970, and thank you so much for allowing us to come into your school. Thank you.
Hello. Now, my my name is John Huber. Now, I head up our education committee of our chapter. You basically have a hierarchy of our chapter. Mike is our president. He does a wonderful job. Lou and Dan and Ed are all on the education committee, and Ed is chairman of our board. Just like Dan and Ed, I was drafted. I was drafted back in March of 1969. Excuse me, I just sit down a second. Anyway, and I was sent to Vietnam at the end of 1969. I was assigned the first logistical command. And we delivered supply all over the country and into a couple of other countries we're not supposed to talk about, but we were in there too, you know. So, say back then, draft was part of life. You know, you accepted it. I started working in the newspaper office, but then I got my orders to be drafted, and fortunately, with the draft, it was 2 years, you can get your job back. Just a couple of things we had before we throw it open to questions. How many of you have relatives, parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, older brothers and sisters that served in the military or are serving in the military? Wow. Okay. How many of those were over in Vietnam by chance? Probably a lot of grandparents. Okay. Okay, wow. Well, there's no VVA chapter in Lebanon County. There's one in Dauphin County and Harrisburg and our chapter. If you like what you hear and they're still around, say something to them because it's a wonderful organization. Really, we meet your Park City Shopping Center in Langston, which is not that far, the third Wednesday of each month at noon. Second question I have. How many of you been down to the wall down in Washington? Okay. Well, anybody, first impression when you saw the wall, what went through your mind? We always ask people that. Kids, first, right here, what was your first impression? Yeah. Wow. That's good. Yeah. And what, yeah, yeah. You know how many names are on that wall? There's over 58,400 names on that wall. And they say Vietnam was a young person's war. Well, over 58,000, over 32,000 were only 18 years old when they were killed. That's not much older than some of you. There's always two statistics that get to me. Number one is there were 997 killed on their first day in Vietnam. They arrived over there by ship, plane, they got off, and they went up to a base camp. Before sunset the next day, they're dead. What's even more upsetting, about 1,450 were killed on their last day in Vietnam. Next morning, they're going to get up and board a big continental jet and get flown back to the world. Oh, wow, we can't wait. They didn't make it. They got killed on their last day. So Dan's going to give you some statistics here.
Okay, I don't have the number that was killed from Cedar Crest. But if you look at the school district, McCaskey High School in Lancaster, they lost 18. Thomas Edison in Philadelphia lost 54, excuse me. You don't know how many from one school. There was 67 killed from Vietnam, from Lancaster County. They're on the wall, Greenwood Cemetery, south of Lancaster. So you gotta look at the numbers.
Lou, you want to talk about the youngest?
Yeah, the youngest serviceman killed in Vietnam, his name was Dan Bullard. He was an African-American kid that enlisted in the Marine Corps when he was 14 years old. And I think, well, how did he enlist in the Marine Corps when he was 14 years old? Well, you didn't have computers back then. So you came in with a driver's license or something that said you were 18 and you were good to go. And he was a good kid. Well, several months after his 15th birthday, he was killed by gunfire, and he's the youngest serviceman killed in Vietnam. Now, in my unit in Vietnam, we had two guys that were 16 years old, and they've been with us for 2 years. So, you know, that happened quite often, more than you would think. When you go down to the wall in Washington, there's a statue there that almost looks like it's guarding the wall. And if you look at it, you can't see it from where you're sitting, but this represents the different ethnicities that served in Vietnam. And it's like, I think one is African American, one is Hispanic, and one is Caucasian. And it's supposed to represent all the different ethnicities that served, because everybody got involved in that war.
Okay. Now there's another statue down there, and Mike and Ed are going to tell you a little bit.
Okay. is another monument that is dedicated to the nursing corps for the women that served in Vietnam. All of those nurses, 99% of them volunteered to go to Vietnam. 8 of them never returned home, and their names are on the wall. As time went on, one of the nurses that served in Vietnam, her name is Miss Diane Evans, started a program of trying to get a monument dedicated to the nursing corps because of what they saw the aftermath of war. And they were suffering from their own PTSD that you could not imagine. As time went on, every time she went up to Capitol Hill, she kept getting questions upon questions. Finally, one of the gentlemen sitting up on Capitol Hill said, you know, we give you this monument, someone's going to come along and want a monument for service stores. Well, the young lady did her homework, and her response was, you already have one. I don't have it up here, but when we go into the gym, there is a photograph of those 8 nurses. And Blue has it as well. It's just something that for us that served in Vietnam, what the nurses went through on a 24-hour day, 7 days a week, you cannot put into words.
Ed, you want to?
Yeah, these young ladies, and I do mean young ladies, that served in Vietnam volunteered. They were all nurses, and most of them were in their early 20s, and they volunteered. Like Mike said, 24/7 they worked. And we have heard speeches from several of them at the wall every year or so. They would have a nurse. I tell you, it makes the hair in the back of your head curl, because these women, these young ladies, saw more carnage in one day than I probably saw my whole year in Vietnam. And a lot of them suffer from severe PTSD. And our hats are off to those young ladies. And unfortunately for a lot of guys, they were the last person they saw before they passed away. And there are some stories about what had happened to some of the nurses during the time, but we won't get into that. But my hats are off to those young ladies. And the donut dollars, too, can't forget that. There was over close to 9,000 women that served in Vietnam, and I think about 6,500 were actually nurses. The rest were volunteers. Like I said, they all volunteered to go to Vietnam.
Okay, now we're done our talking. Now we want to hear from you. What your questions? What do you want to know about the Vietnam War and the Vietnam War era? You can answer pretty much everything you ask.
Real quick, we do want to point out that Mrs. Baney also joined the panel. If she wants to real quick tell us about her.
Yes, hello, and thank you so much for allowing me to also present with you gentlemen. It is quite an honor. What I do as a living historian is I tell the story of the donut dollies. And the donut dollies originated in World War II, and they brought hope and smiles to the soldiers during World War II. And they served donuts, obviously, as donut dollies. However, in the Korean War and also the Vietnam War, they were called again into service, and instead of serving donuts because of the heat and the humidity and the tropical climate of Vietnam, they served cookies instead, cookies and Hawaiian punch. And their job as groups of 3, their job was to have outposts at the various posts and bases in country, and to just have a touch of home, a place where the soldiers could just relax for a bit, perhaps before going out into the bush, into the country where the fighting was the most intense. The donut dollies supplied writing paper, they supplied envelopes, they supplied toiletries, things that the soldiers would need, things that they would need to communicate with home, and as they were affiliated with the Red Cross, if they needed to contact contact home or any other things like that that they needed to do. They also had things like camp songs, fashion shows, and their main purpose was to be bubbly and smiling 24/7 and to keep the spirits of the soldiers lively and just to get their minds off of things for a while. I have on my table a deck of playing cards, a pamphlet of fun songs, and also a few religious things, although the American Red Cross did not, they weren't affiliated.
Excuse me, we're going to have to get to the questions.
Okay, with any religion or anything, they did provide one as well. And so the job of the donor dolly was very important as well. And again, it is an honor to be here with these gentlemen.
Okay, let's start the questions. In the front row here, we have a couple of rows who've been pre-selected students with some questions for you guys. We're just going to pass the mic back and forth, and we'll go from there, okay? Does everyone volunteer to go first? Awesome.
Hello? So, I'm from Period 1 AP US History, and for everyone in my class, I'd like to thank you for your service and the sacrifice you've done. The first question. First question I would like to ask, what were some of the places you served? I'm sorry. What were some of the places you served during the war, and what were your roles there?
Well, I went over in 1965 and with 7th Marines. And in the beginning of that war, your job was to pacify the public, try to win them over. So our corpsmen, Navy corpsmen are very good medics. They are very good Navy corpsmen. They would, if a farmer was hurt out in the field, they'd patch him up, deliver babies, that kind of thing. And we had 2 battalion doctors that served. There was a cleft palate clinic in Guignon, and they would serve there occasionally when we weren't out. But most of the time we were out in the field, and I never saw donut dollies, by the way. 65, that we weren't even getting sea rations right, so we weren't getting donut dollies. But that was the main thing. Our main job was to keep the Viet Cong off of the villagers, because they would come in and take their rice and threaten them. So our job was to keep them away.
Okay, next. By the way, I see a lot of prepared questions. It doesn't have to be prepared questions. Something's on your mind you want to know. Anything, impromptu questions, that's wonderful.
Weather, insects, terrain, food.
So I'm from the period 8 history CP, and we were wondering, what was the funniest thing that happened during your years of service? What was the funniest thing that happened during your years of service?
Not too many funny things in the military.
Yeah, here we go.
That's not really funny, but it's kind of stupid. I'm like the guys that were later on. We didn't have rotation dates that I knew of, so I didn't know when I was going home, 6 months, 6 years, I didn't know. And I didn't worry about it, and I'm thankful I didn't have that. But anyway, it turned out to be about 2 or 3 days before I was leaving the country, and I was up on the hill one day during some downtime, and I found a little baby snake about that big. And it was a crate snake, I knew what it was. And a crate snake is one of the 4 deadly snakes in Vietnam. They bite you and you're pretty well dead. I don't even think they had an antidote for that. Well, anyway, I was poking him with the stick, and he's going like this. And I actually nips my finger once or twice, but he doesn't break skin. So our Navy corpsman comes over, and he steps on the snake and squashes him. And I thought, hey, why'd you kill my snake? He goes, don't you know what that is? I said, yeah, it's a crate snake, but it's the baby. He said, well, the venom in a baby is as potent as the adult. And I had this aha moment. I'm seeing a telegram going home to my father going, dear Mr. Farganis, we regret to inform you your son was killed by a baby snake. Can you imagine how embarrassing a big bad Marine would have been getting killed by a stupid baby snake? I would have rolled over my grave.
Lou said about something being funny, this wasn't funny, but in the way it was, like Lou said, you never knew when you were coming home. You know you had a good tour, but you didn't know the exact date. And we were all got up in the morning, packed our gear away, got ready to move out and start patrols. Sergeant comes over and says, "Bookman." I said, "Yes." He says, "Get your gear together, you're going home." He didn't have to tell me twice. I was on that chopper on my way home. And that wasn't funny, but it sure was welcome.
Next question.
We'll get you next, okay? We'll get you next.
I'm Farah from Mrs. Winger's Period 2 American Cultures class. We learned about the effects of PTSD and how to overcome that.
I was just diagnosed in 2017 with PTSD that I didn't even know I had. I was up at the VA close by and trying to file a claim for some Agent Orange. And the guy asked me, he said, "What about your PTSD?" I said, "What PTSD?" He says, "Do you have it?" I said, "I don't think so." He said, "Well, let me fill a form out." So he filled a form out. We sent it in. About a month later, I got a note from the VA to come up for a psychological examination, which was funny to begin with. And after about a month and a half, I got a letter in the mail that said I was diagnosed with mild PTSD that I didn't even know I had. But there are guys that just cannot function. There was just an article on TV last night about it. It is not pretty. It's something you'll never get rid of. There's no pill for it. Therapy does help. I was in therapy for a while until COVID hit, and then that put a wrench in that. But my wife says I should go back again, so I guess I better listen to her.
Like Ed, he has PSD. I don't know if anybody else did, but there is one thing that all of us pretty much had, and we're going to talk about this very seriously. It's called Agent Orange. Mike, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Okay, excuse me. Do any of you, by a show of hands, know what Agent Orange is? Oh, I can go home. Okay.
That's a good job for you two.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this now. Do any of you know that if you have a grandfather, grandmother, or family members, mom or dad, that served in Vietnam, you could be affected? Let me see a show of hands.
All right.
Very good. For those of you who don't know that last question, some of us, all of us up here, suffer from the effects somehow of Agent Orange, which was used as a defoliant to kill the overgrowth in Vietnam, so the soldiers and the military could not be shot at with the enemy using that as cover. To give you an example of how potent it was, if you take one of your cornfields in the month of July, August, you can't see across the road. But if that was sprayed with Agent Orange in 24 hours, it's wide open. This was the job of Agent Orange, and it did it quite well. However, moving very fast and very forward, they were starting to see that individuals that served in Vietnam, whether military or civilian, were in contact with Agent Orange. There was a very, very high increase of certain illnesses and cancers associated with these people that were near Agent Orange. There are 18 illnesses directly related to Agent Orange. For myself, I have type 2 diabetes. I wasn't on the land. Where did I get it from? Well, our ship was very close to the shoreline. We drank the water. That's how we made fresh water. For some of these gentlemen, they may have gotten sprayed on, they may have drinking the water out of the canal, they may have, whatever the case may be, they could even come in contact with it on their skin. There are 38 cancers related to Agent Orange. And they found this out by experimenting with lab rats. And right now, Agent Orange will go 7 generations, but it can skip a generation. This is why it's so important for us to relay this to you. We are not here to scare you. We are here to try and educate you and to talk to those individuals that are a direct bloodline to yourselves. But you want to do it in a one-to-one atmosphere. Don't do it in a group. They're not going to talk about it, as you well may know. How we know this to be actual fact is we were in Elizabethtown High School in around 2019, 2018. A young lady came up and we were showing the artifacts, and her grandfather served in country in Vietnam. Mother and father never left the country, but he lives with that family. And they were talking, and something kicked up his intuition, and he said to the mother and father, I'd like to have a copy of her medical records. I want to take her to the VA. The family agreed. He gets the copies, he takes her to the VA. She is a recipient of Agent Orange. It'll go through the bloodline. But there is no urine test, there's no blood test. The only way a person can say, I have the effects of Agent Orange, you have to prove when you were there, where you were, and what your illness is. All three of them have to have a direct link. For those of you who have, especially grandparents, and you know that they're going to the VA for some type of illness, you want to talk to them one-on-one. They will take care of you. They will bring you to the VA. You're going to have to prove what illness or situation you may have from your outside medical doctor. And yes, you can get on the registry. But as I was saying with this girl, it was truth. That was the first time we ever had actual evidence of a person one-on-one saying, that's me. If any of you have any further questions, when we get into the gym, don't hesitate to come and see one of us, and we'll be glad to try to give you as much information as we can.
Ed, do you want to add anything to that?
Like he said, we drank water out of rice paddies and rivers. That's where we got our drinking water from. They didn't send water out to us out of the field. You filled your canteen up and you put a halogen, iodine, in your canteen. And you shake it up and you let it sit for a couple minutes. Then you can shake the top of it off, and the sediment would float to the top and get rid of it. The water still tasted terrible. And my mom, she used to send me Kool-Aid in her letters and put the Kool-Aid in. That's where we got our water from. And probably that's how I contacted her. I have peripheral neuropathy in my feet, and I've been the past year and a half, I've been being treated for skin cancer. So, thanks to Uncle Sam. We call it the gift that keeps on giving.
Okay, we spent some time, that's a very important subject to us. Now, the Vietnam War supposedly started in 1965, and we're supposed to go over there as an advisor. Well, Dan's going to tell you about being an advisor.
We went to the Republic of Vietnam. They told us we're advisors of the Republic. Okay, fine. Well, the 7th of February, we lost 4 men in a helicopter. And this captain says, Wayne, remember, we're here as advisors. I said, sir, I've been here since Thanksgiving Day, 1967. I have not advised one soul. We just lost 4 men. My opinion is they don't want us here, and let's get the hell out. That was all I spent over 9 months there.
Back to your questions. Anyway.
I'm Allie, and I'm from Mrs. Winker's Period 2 American Cultures class. My question is, how thorough and effective was your training?
With the training. Well, you had everybody else.
I had, I went in 1962, so I had over 2.5 years of specialized training, everything from MP, jungle training, cold weather training, special warfare, knife fight. I had all kinds of stuff. But I'm the exception, though, because I was there early. Some of these guys went in, 8 weeks of boot camp, a little bit of advanced infantry training, and they got set right over, and that wasn't suck. Really.
Well, I'll tell you, he's right. And these guys went over early, went over the whole unit. When I went over, I had 3 days. I was at Fort Belvoir. You got your orders, you're going to be going to Vietnam in 2 weeks. And it was ridiculous because Fort Belvoir outside Washington, D.C. was nothing like over in Vietnam. And we're going over as replacement troops to replace somebody who's either coming home, their tour's up, or maybe he was wounded, and there's another reason he's coming home. And it was just, it completely, you know, we're all pretty young and everything like that, and you're going into a third world country, probably for the first time, or probably all of them. And it's really something else, because, you know, it's the climate, number one. I went over this first week in December, and you get off the ship, and you get Cameron Bay, and you go out there, it's like 105 degrees, which, you know, don't come out a year of this to go through. So, it all depended how much, when you went over, and that, you know, how much training it was.
My training, like John said, about when I got drafted, I spent the 1 week at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, getting indoctrinated, getting my shots, uniforms, testing and things like that. Went to Fort Lewis, Washington, started basic training out there, spent almost nine months training to go to Vietnam, and we were going to Vietnam. They told us the first line of basic training, your chances of going to Vietnam are as good as anybody. I never heard of Vietnam. I do now. I didn't then. And 9 months we trained. I was in a weapons platoon. We had 81mm mortars. So when everybody else, all the other infantry platoons were out practicing tactics and that, we were out in the firing range firing the mortars. We got to Vietnam, we took the mortars out one day, and the terrain was so unforgiving, they shipped all the mortars back, gave everybody an M16, and said, you're now an infantry platoon. We had no infantry training. That's the military for you.
Okay, I got out of basic training, went to aircraft engine school for 12 weeks. All we did was work on aircraft engines. Went to Fort Bragg, we put the unit together. We got 31 brand new helicopters. Come time to go to Vietnam, they sent 11 helicopters to Korea, they sent the rest of us to Vietnam. We had more than enough training for what we did.
I'd just like to say welcome home. That's the first thing to say. My name is Sean. I'm from Mrs. Wanger's Period 2 American Cultures class. My first question is, what surprised you the most upon coming back home to America?
Coming back home.
Well, I can tell you that, you know, a lot of people will say that everything changed, but in reality, what I found out was I had changed. You know, because before going to Vietnam, I spent a whole other 13-month tour in Southeast Asia, so I went all over Asia, so going to Vietnam was not a strange thing for me. But when I came home, the friends I had, and this is not meant as an insult, but they were still like high school, you know, talking about that. And I've been all over the world, and I just couldn't relate to them anymore. Not that they had changed, I changed. And it took some adjusting for me, really did.
Yeah, a couple of us have some stories to tell you. I have one, and Mike will tell you his too. I came home right before Thanksgiving, 1970, and I just excited. Not only was I being discharged from Vietnam, I was being discharged from the Army because I had got drafted, and my 2 years was up, and I was ready to go back to my old job at my newspaper office, and find out what happened to my old girlfriend. And I worked in the newspaper office. Is Mr. Gates here by chance in the audience? I worked with him at the newspaper office for many, many years. Anyway, and the last thing they did, when we came into San Francisco, and this is right before Thanksgiving in 1970, and San Francisco was the heart of the protest movement then. Make love, not war, you know, drugs and everything like that. And we're being processed, and they give you a nice big check, and it was $950, and that was a lot of money back then in 1970. And the last thing they said was, there's a few people out here that don't see things quite your way, but there's just a few of them, just don't worry about it. Oh my gosh, 10:30 at night, we come out of the Travis Air Force Base to get on a bus that takes us to Civilian Airport to get flown back to Philly. And anyway, my gosh, there they are, 4 deep outside, 10:30 at night, yelling at the bus, ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh, the NLF's gonna win, baby burner, throwing things at the bus. What did we do? We just served our country. It wasn't my idea to get drafted or to go to Vietnam, but I did it. We don't deserve this. It was sort of a shock. Now back here in Lancaster, it was a lot different. But then, I tell this story, I had a girlfriend through college, we've been writing, and then all of her letters stopped. And about halfway through my tour, I said, what's going on? So we had a layover in Chicago on the way to Philly, and I said, I'm going to call her. I knew her, I went to school in Indiana, and I knew her dad's number, and her dad's name in Indianapolis. So I called down there to the house, and her dad answered, and I said, is Karen there? And he said, who's calling? I said, it's John Hoover. Oh, she's married. Do you want to throw some? Yeah.
Now that's funny, I don't care who it is.
So that was my experience.
That's one of the funny things about being a servant in the military, that's one of them right there.
Yeah, well, Mike has a story, and Ed has a story.
Okay, upon landing at Kennedy Airport, I had to wear my uniform home. I was getting separated in San Diego. And being I was separated, instead of me wearing the normal white hat, I wore the black beret home. I was very proud of this. So we get into LA, there was no problem, none whatsoever. And we flew into Kennedy Airport, and another sailor and myself are heading towards the baggage claim. And as we're getting closer and closer, there is a full Navy captain and a brand new Navy ensign approaching us. And both of us saluted the two officers. The ensign turned around, looks at me and said, hey sailor, you're out of uniform. The Navy captain turned, looked at him and said, you shut the hell up, you don't know where he's been. The Navy captain saluted me back. And I just thought to myself, if this ensign treats his subordinates the way he just treated me, he's going to be in a world of hurt. The one thing you have to understand was, with a lot of us coming home, your family, your friends, your girlfriends, they greeted you. They didn't ask a lot of questions. But the general public, To give you an example, if this was in 1970, 72, 73, and if you get a bunch of us coming into this auditorium, it'd be empty because we wore a uniform. Didn't matter that you went to Vietnam or not. You wore a uniform. The country did not respect those who had served or were served. Your generation turned that around. When we go into high schools, there's a number of you that'll say, oh, thank you for your service, hello. It's a way of greeting, and we really, really appreciate that. It's not that we were looking for it, we were looking just for the courtesy. That's all it was. Thank you.
Okay, Ed, you tell me, or Mike, your story about the school.
Oh, yeah. Well, I came home in 1966. There weren't very many protests going on. Now, I was a high school dropout idiot, but because I had 2.5 years in the Marine Corps before I went to Vietnam, I was able to get a high school diploma, and then later go to college. Well, before I started going full time, I'm from New York City, like Mike is. He's from Brooklyn, though. Yeah. But anyway, I've been out of school for a long time, so I had to bone up on math and English. So I was taking math and English at Hunter College at Midtown Manhattan. Well, the one day I'm walking into the building, and I'm holding the door open for the guy behind me, and I'm wearing my Marine Corps ring with a little emblem on it, and it's coked out, burnt out, didn't know that anything like that, because there was so much coke. I hear him behind me, he looks at my ring, and he goes, hey man, you want those baby burgers? Now, these guys can tell you I'm a puppy dog, and he's clean. This guy stunk. I mean, he was so filthy. And I think what really got me was that here's this idiot that can't run his own life. He's filthy, doesn't take a bath. His nose is coked out. He can't hardly speak. And he's looking at my ring and judging me and calling me a baby burner. These guys up on the stage will tell you I am a puppy dog. I don't ever get angry about nothing. But boy, this guy pushed my button when he said that. And I turned around, I threw my forearm up on his neck, and I pinned him on the wall, and put my fist in his face, and I said, how would you like to wear that insignia on your forehead for life? And he punks out on me. And I'm glad he did, because I would have hit him, I would have went to jail, even though he was the idiot. And then the other question I had, what was this guy even doing going into a college building? You know? Jeez. But anyway, luckily I didn't hit him, so. But I am a puppy dog. I don't get angry much.
Yeah, like you said about, we didn't know, I didn't know anything about the protest, like in 67. And I saw a couple of the Hare Krishnas, they're hippies, and they were at the airport handing out flowers and wishing everybody peace and love. That was it, that's all I saw. But there are stories, some of the men in our chapter were spit on, and John said they had fruit and vegetables thrown at him, cursed at. We have a fellow who his dad took him to an American Legion, and they wanted to buy him a beer coming home from Vietnam. They wouldn't serve him, or his father. His father was a life member, and he threw his took his membership card out, tore it up, and threw it out. That's how we were treated. We didn't want no parades. I didn't want to parade, but we wanted respect. You know, especially guys that were drafted and went over there and fought for whatever, freedom or whatever, and saw people die. We didn't want to do that. And when I came home, a lot of guys were told, do not wear your uniform out in the public, which I wasn't told that. I was issued a brand new uniform after discharge and wore that home. It didn't bother me in the least. When I got off the plane in Travis from Vietnam, coming down the gangplank, when I got on the ground, I got down my hands and knees and kissed the tarmac. And I'm not ashamed of doing that. I was so glad to be home. And then within 24 hours of landing there, I was back in Philadelphia. My mom and dad, my girlfriend at the time, who I eventually married the first time, picked me up at the airport and drove home. And like John said, there was no talk of it. Nobody mentioned anything about Vietnam. My mom said about she saw so-and-so outside at the store and somebody asked how I was doing. That was it. And when Dad parked the car, I walked toward the house, and I wanted to take a shortcut into the backyard. I wanted to get in. I wanted to get my uniform off. I wanted to go to sleep. I was tired. And Mom said, no, go around the front. I said, no, Mom, I can cut through the parking lot next to our house, climb over the fence, and I'm like, no, you got to go around. Okay, Mom, we'll go around. So I went around the front of the house, and up we had into the doghouse. And on the second floor, there was a big banner that said, welcome home, Skip. That was my welcome home to Vietnam. And it was like that way till the 80s, when things finally turned around.
And as Mike said, it started with people your age, maybe 15, 20 years ago. They recognized us and they saw people with our hat and thank you for your service. And now, fortunately, more adults, realize that too. A lot of times we were, in Weiss Market or something like that, a store, and people say, go up to you and just thank you. And that means a lot to us. Of course, when you think back, though, where were those people back in the 1960s when we came home? That didn't happen back then. Okay, next question. Did you have another one? Yeah. Next question.
There have been a lot of wartime movies about Vietnam. Do the movies accurately portray life during the war?
No. I don't like any of the movies that ever came out about Vietnam except for We Were Soldiers, the Mel Gibson movie that portrays the battle that took place in November of 1965, about a month before I was born. But anyway, that's the only one that even comes close. And 2 years ago, we were down at the wall, because we go down every Memorial Day, and there's always guys that are there from Landing Zone X-Ray. That's where they, where the battle was taking place. That's where the choppers were going in and dropping the troops off. And I asked him, I said, well, how accurate do you think that movie is? And he said, well, about 20%, which isn't bad for a movie, because I mean, when I see Sylvester Stallone holding M60 machine guns in one hand, give me a break. He knows how to fly. He knows how to fly a helicopter. He knows how to, run a tank. He knows everything about everything. No way. I mean, it's just a bunch of baloney. I don't like any of them.
Some of the documentaries have been excellent. Now, this is the last year of the war. About 3 weeks ago was when Saigon fell, which means a lot to me because our big base was stationed right outside of Saigon. And one of those places they saw with the MVA and the VC going in there. I know those places pretty well. But anyway, what's the thought here? The two documentaries, Netflix had something very recently. It was in the Vietnam, and it was excellent. It was about a 6-part series, And then ABC a couple of weeks ago, Vietnam, The Lost Generation. That was excellent too. Some of the TV documentaries are very good. One that is not very good is Ken Burns, Vietnam.
12 hours of wasted
Yeah,
time.
that really.
And the Navy wasn't there.
Yeah, he concentrated too much on the other side, and really, I mean, ignored, what the Navy did, what the Air Force did. But I agree with Lou. We Were Soldiers is probably the best movie.
I will recommend another documentary though. It was one that was done maybe 20 years ago by National Geographic, and it's only 3 hours, and it's called Inside the Vietnam War. Every so often you'll see that pop up. If you get a chance to watch that one, I like it because it starts going back to the French involvement, and it ends with us leaving the country, and then President Ford took over for Nixon after he resigned, and the Democratic Congress sort of coerced them into cutting the funds off for South Vietnam. So shortly after they did that, these people had nothing to fight with, and Saigon fell, and it was the end of it.
I think we ought to take just maybe one or two more questions, because it's going to take some time for us to get over there and for you to come over and start looking at our displays. So, question somewhere? Go ahead.
Did you have any relations with Vietnamese people, like love or any relations with anyone there?
Yeah, because I was there early, and as I mentioned earlier, part of my job was to get in with the public. And I tell you the truth, I went back there in 1929. In 2022, nobody got a panel, but with some of the guys from our group. And I have to say that the people there are still very friendly and they just call it the American War because they had the Chinese War, they had the Japanese War, the French War, so it was just the American War, no hard feeling. But yeah, but the people that were friendly when we gave them a chance to be. And anyway, I'll just make this short. I had my squad out at a checkpoint. I forget it was Highway 1 or Highway 9. We had to check any vehicles coming from either Laos or North Vietnam to make sure they weren't bringing contraband and weapons, whatever. So anyway, there's a little farmhouse right by there, and there were two little kids, a little girl, a little boy. They'd come out to our position out there every day, and we were sort of like glorified babysitters. We were watching these kids, and the little girl used to come out in a little silk jacket, and I don't know, they was not running in water with everything, but they was sparkling. And the little girl looked to be about 3. She may have been old, had that little bowl, but really cute. And the little boy looked to be about 6, and he was a major pain in the butt, but he was like really cute too. So, like, whatever sea rations we had that we didn't buy, or the cigarettes that came with them that we didn't smoke, we give to the father, Well, the mother found out we were leaving, but we were getting, moving on to something else. And she brought out a big pot of chicken soup with the baby corn and everything. And we felt bad taking it because these people were still for it, scratching out the living. But anyway, we took it because not to take it would have been insulting. So when we left, we gave them some extra cases of sea rations to try to make, because we really felt for the people, you know what I mean? But I always like the people, and when I went back this last time, it was the same thing. People very friendly, you give them a chance to be.
Okay, I think maybe one more question. We'll get over there. One more question.
Take the mic so you can hear.
Yeah.
Oh, this way or that way? There you go. I was confused.
That's not what I need.
I'm Iman from Mr. Harding's Period 6 American Cultures class. And my question is, was there a point in the war where you felt like giving up?
Was what? I didn't hear you.
More than the war, we felt like giving up.
Feel like giving up? No. We don't give up.
No, we don't want to give up. We just want to come home.
Nobody ever gave up. The government
The
gave
question was
up.
what we were doing there. That came up later on, But no, we were trained to go there and do what we had to do. And if you want to ask a question, please do what you're told.
There were no major battles ever lost in Vietnam by the U.S. I mean, the government didn't know how to handle the war. They were trying to micromanage rather than let the military handle the war. And you had these morons, McNamara and Johnson trying to run a war, and they didn't know what the hell they were doing. No, seriously, they didn't know. They had no clue. And they wouldn't let the military run it. They tried to run it from Washington. And you can't do that. You saw the same thing in Afghanistan recently. So,
Okay, one more quick question.
we'll let the vote.
Did you feel as though you were fighting because it was what your duty required of you, or because you had like the incentive to fight, the motivation in yourself to?
I'm not sure I got the whole question.
Okay.
For me, it was both, because I mentioned earlier the high school dropout, and I had no direction in my life. And I went into the Marine Corps, and they really got me straightened out. I went in at 155 pounds, looking like I was a war camp survivor or something. And I came out of there 180 pounds, nothing but muscle. And I had the incentive to get my education and do a whole lot of other stuff. And I always say, even though I was wounded twice, blah, 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 the Marine Corps did a lot more for me than I ever did for it, and I'll always be grateful to it.
The other thing too is, at our age back at that time, you had three choices concerning the military. You either got drafted, you enlisted, or you ran to Canada. Well, the last one, we have no sense of even discussing that. But when you join the military, you do what you're told, and you go where you're told. And it's just something that becomes second nature. For myself, I still do things today that I learned in the Navy. I have no regrets whatsoever.
You can tie your shoes now.
I know. And I know my right from my left, even though I didn't learn how to march. But the military, it depends on your outlook when you go in. And the one thing you must understand is that when you go into the military, regardless of the branch of service, you lose your individuality. They have to do this. So now as you're coming up to the boot camp, you work as a group. Because this will follow you. I don't care if it's 2 years, 4 years, 20 years. This is the way it works. And it has proven that it works that way. Good question.
I didn't like the military. I'll say that to this day. I didn't like it. But I did what I was told. I listened, obeyed the rules and orders, whatever, and I got through it. And then when we got home and being treated the way we were, a lot of us guys, I took my stuff off, threw it in a duffel bag, and that was it. From 67 until late 80s, when I went down to the wall, and then I kind of snapped out of it, and here I am today. I couldn't do, when I first started doing these panels, I was scared. I didn't know what to say. You have to watch what you say. We have some terrible stuff going on. And, but today, I'm as proud as anybody to be a Vietnam veteran and a Vietnam combat veteran.
You gotta remember, the military's gonna make you a man. You're gonna learn to get up in the morning. You get away from your parents. It's the best thing ever happened to me. Believe me, I was drafted. I had no intention of joining the Army. I tried to join the Navy, but I didn't get there in time. But to this day, I hang my shirts up in the closet the same way. Dumb stuff, okay? You learn to work as a unit. You're all equal. That's why they give you a uniform and give you a haircut. Doesn't matter where you come from, what kind of clothes you have. You're going to wear their clothes. Their boots. You want to shine the boots every day. Basic training, you change boots every day. They put stripes, they put white spots on the back of them. One day was white, one day was black. You learn to take orders. And it makes you a man.